It is Ian Ryan with the pre-match warm-up as we start to look ahead to Wolves at the weekend. I'm joined by Stu Wright, Neil Atkinson and Sean Rogers as well. This one, I'm reliably informed, is a free show. It's normally part of our subscription service, but we are in partnership with Saily. Saily is an eSIM app that travellers can use to get fast and reliable mobile data in over 200 destinations to ensure you don't get a nasty phone bill when you arrive home. One of our viewers, listeners, recently got in touch, Adam, who was in the US with his partner. I won't read all of this, but he spent 2 weeks away, and he did say he'd never previously considered eSIM as an option, but noticed it on one of our YouTube shows. The tour discount really helped, but to be fair, we definitely use it anyway, and we'll be using it in the future. So you can't say much more than that. So if you are interested, please do get on Saily.
I used it in Morocco, and Henry, who was just here setting up, used it in Milan when he was at Liverpool Inter Milan. So
Can't argue with any of that.
No. Very useful, yeah. and quite the money saver.
Absolutely. Stu, the manager, has done his press conference. Understandably, it was dominated early on by Alexander Isak. I'm gutted for us because he's a player who maybe was looking like he might come to the boil. You're gutted for him as well, just all round. It's a massive blow. Given what the squad looks like at the minute in terms of size and options, it's a huge blow for the Reds.
It is. It's a blow on all kinds of levels, isn't it? As you say, the squad size, everyone seems to be dropping like flies at the minute for one reason or another. And I think, it's almost like poetic, the fact that he gets injured at the very moment we see Ekitike, Wirtz and Isak combine in what was potentially the scouting team's vision for what that could have looked like in the summer, and it's a great finish. But you knew straight away from his reaction that it was serious. And I mean, it's mad to me to see a player in that situation who it's clearly calling it as a serious potential injury, that he's walking off the pitch. You know what I mean? You'd like to think smarter heads would prevail there and make sure that everything is done to protect them going forward. The manager said a couple of months. I mean, it depends how much you read into that, if he's been definitive on that time scale as much as he can be and those kind of things. But for me, you've got to start thinking now, well, even if it is a couple of months, he wasn't at the races fitness-wise anyway. He was probably just about getting there. Now he's going to take a big backward step. So that'll take you to the end of February. I think you're looking at March again in terms of getting up to speed. I wouldn't expect to see him on the bench until April probably. And if you're in the latter stages of the Champions League, great, he becomes an option. But it certainly does give Liverpool a bit of a headache now and a little bit of urgent thinking time as we enter the transfer market.
That all feels really fair, Sean, doesn't it? The manager did say a couple of months. I've got to be honest, I had a shock on that. After kind of, the weekend and stuff, and reports started to come out about what it might look like for him in terms of the severity, a couple of months might not be that bad. But we know this is a player who's already taken a little bit of time to find fitness and form. He wasn't quite there with the form, but as I said before, maybe it was starting to come to the boil a little bit. We certainly got snippets against Spurs. Do you think it means Liverpool might have to look at the transfer market? The manager wouldn't get drawn on it. I understand why. He never does. But it does not feel like we're light up top.
Totally. I mean, hopefully it's a Djibril Cissé type situation where he can come back and score a pen in Champions League final victory, which we'd all shake hands on more than, wouldn't we? It's so sad for the player, as you were commenting on there. In terms of going into the market, it's really interesting and difficult in terms of what's the plan. We were doing a gutter show before, and I don't think the plan in the summer was to change that drastically. So in terms of Slot wanting to use high, fast, pacey wingers with output, I don't think that's changed. The question is, has it changed now? I do agree that the manager needed to, after PSV and Nottingham Forest, I think you need to batten down the hatches a bit and just go back to basics, almost like 4-4-1-1. I'm happy just to dog this for a bit. The question is, at what point do you think the confidence is starting to come back? And maybe what's the next phase after that? And then what's the plan? Has Slot looked at it and said, I just don't think I can have Florian Wirtz in the 10, two wingers bombing on, a centre forward like Hugo or Alex up top and not leave us exposed? I need to do something different. If that's the case, where do you see Semenyo fitting in short and long term? Why did Liverpool reportedly go a bit cold in it in November? maybe warming that up a little bit now. I think when it comes to the transfer market, if they can go and get Semenyo, I think they should. I think the question comes for August and September. If you told me that he was one of Liverpool's best 3, I'd be nervous. If you told me that he's one of Liverpool's 6, I'd be very relaxed. I think for right now, he hits the ground running, can play both sides. But the difficulty for Liverpool is, what if they've been working on a wide forward for the summer, that's someone different, that they feel might have a bigger ceiling, that is maybe a bit younger. And if you bring Semenyo in now, what a domino effect, if any, on the summer transfer business. There's so many moving parts to it that I think, yes, they do need to. I'm not sure how easy it is in practice.
People are putting that Semenyo one down as not necessarily nailed on, Neil, but I've heard a few people say, well, surely Liverpool go and do that now. But I agree with Sean, unless it was part of the plan, I'm not sure it's typical Liverpool to then go and do that if you were never going to go for him in the first place. Now, listen, they've got the injury now to Isak on top of 1 or 2 other injuries. Maybe that just changed hearts and minds a little bit. I suppose, first of all, do you like the player? Would you want to see Liverpool go in for him? And B, do you see it happening?
I think they're a funny club to buy from, Bournemouth now. I think that you look at them this year, they're less effective, but he's getting more goals. Whenever I see them, I feel like every single Bournemouth player plays on a bit of an island. They're all effectively almost like separate attackers who occasionally find ways to link up from nowhere. I'm not sure on the player, but I think it's really difficult to judge, as I say, Bournemouth full stop, to judge where Bournemouth are. You know, for instance, Solanke goes from Bournemouth to Tottenham, and it's been a mixed bag. He's looked the part at times, but obviously the fitness has played a role. I think Bournemouth really missed the 2 centre-backs in terms of being able to get themselves playing, and I think they've really missed Cook and Christie in the middle of the park. I say this because it's almost hard to judge him as anything other than almost like a highlights reel player, because that's sort of how Iola's using him. You can't be a highlights reel player at Liverpool, but that said, at the minute, we all quite like some highlights. What I like about him is I think he's good in the air. I think the versatility, I think, is good. And to Sean's point on whether or not it's part of the plan, I think there's a couple of things here, is that, in general anyway, the plan can change. Before you even get to Liverpool's injuries or other questions this season, increasingly I am of the view that Liverpool, when the manager says 2 for every position, it's 2 for every position. I don't think you can do it anymore where you're saying you'll be all right with 5 forwards who are top quality because you've got Salah. I think firstly the Salah question is a question, both in terms of whether or not he is now sort of so relentlessly has to be put on the pitch. That's there, and also how long he's going to be here for is also a question. So I think if you do get Semenyo, listen, I'm very much one of, you know, I've said all the way through, 8 defenders, 5 midfielders, 5 forwards, 1 Florian Wirtz is a way to build a squad. That's 19 outfield players, and then you throw 3 goalkeepers in, that gets you to 22. But more and more I'm thinking, no, I'm looking at where Arsenal are at the minute. Arsenal, they've got unbelievable strength in depth. They've also got a bit of an injury crisis, and they're struggling to get lads on the pitch. When you actually break it down, you know, there's Arsenal players who they're really struggling to find a pathway for because it's so intense. Both the nature of the league that we're in, the demands of the Champions League up to this point. If you want to have any real interest in domestic cup football, which by all means I'm happy to say you want to write off for a couple of seasons because we've got a really good recent record, but still, if you get a certain draw, like we're all expecting to go through against Barnsley, you've got to pick a team. You've got to pick a team for the 4th round. And if suddenly you've got Everton away in the 4th round, I'll be the first one saying he should pick his first 11. You know what I mean? We're all hypocrites. So I think as part of that, you've got to, you know, I just wonder now whether or not it is 6. And if it is 6, and Semenyo is one of your 6 by the start of next season, well, he's homegrown. He can play both sides. He could possibly do stuff for you through the middle. I'm less convinced on that. He can probably play in a 4-4-2 or a 4-2-3-1 or a 4-3-3, depending on how you sort of view that. So it becomes, I know the homegrown thing's massive. Part of why Liverpool are finding the squad build really difficult is they've arguably got 2 players taking up non-homegrown slots who the manager doesn't want to pick in Endo and Chiesa, and that's got to change by the start of next season. But they're not filling out with players the manager wants to pick the homegrown spots. If you want to have a 25-man squad, you've got to have 8 lads who are homegrown who the manager wants to pick. And at the minute, we haven't got that. So does Semenyo fall into that category? So you're going to pay a premium at this point. Even if it's still a no-release clause, you're going to pay a premium. But you can make an argument. And then the next phase of the argument is, and it'd help in January, wouldn't it? It'd help in February. There's job to be done. So, you know, as I say, without being utterly in love with the idea of the player and the transfer, I think you can just end up sort of going, there's loads of common sense reasons to do this. There's a converse argument, which is that might have been the argument that was made around Frimpong, and the manager might not be 100% into Frimpong as a right back at this point. But, you know, I think you've got to work with the manager. They've all got to trust each other. And if they decide it's the right thing to do, then I think they should go for it wholeheartedly.
Stu, we don't want to get too into the transfers on this show, but it feels appropriate given what's going on. And the manager was asked about it as well, more importantly. You were quite clear on the weekend show that you thought Liverpool would go for Semenyo. I almost think if it does happen, then it almost Saily was probably in the pipeline, because we know these transfers, these big transfers, they take a lot of time to get sorted out. You know, often if you are the club doing the legwork, that puts you in a really, really good position. I'm not saying teams can't come in and swoop, because it's happened loads and loads of times, but if you do put the legwork in, it puts you in a really strong position with the player and stuff, and the club you're buying from, all that. Are you still of the opinion that they'll do it in January? You know, you said they'll definitely buy him, or you thought they would. Do you think it does happen in January? The manager asked about Elliott as well. Obviously, different type of player. Didn't want to get too drawn on that. You know, said he's an Aston Villa player. I mean, listen, he's still a Liverpool player, really. He's only on loan there. And I doubt Harvey Elliott's ever really felt like an Aston Villa player. What did you make of that as well?
Well, on the Semenyo thing, yeah, I am of the opinion that it's probably done. And I think the talks with the player, I would imagine, have been wrapped up for a while, but then Liverpool have got to make the decision of whether they're going to push the button on it, and I think there's probably been a little bit of thinking over that. There's no need for them to be you know, having negotiations with the club early in advance, because he's got the release, so they don't need to do that. For me, it just makes all kinds of sense. It doesn't make sense for me, when I look at it, for Semenyo to go anywhere else. I've looked at the options there that are being presented in the media. The Man United one is wild, by the way, absolutely wild, and that seems to be the strongest one that's getting pushed on the narrative. Where's he going to play? Wing back? That's mental. That's absolutely mental, and you can't. I mean, for all the money in the world, you can't convince me that that's going to be persuading the player. I think they've got a hard job to persuade him positionally where he's going to play. Does he think he'll get a game? Does he think he's good enough to get in that team? I'm sure he does, but it doesn't make sense to me. Then you look at the City angle and you think, well, do they really need him? And they've got Doku already. I'm not sure. If they can make a strong enough argument to him that there's a place for him, and they can map that out to him, then yeah. But it's obvious with Liverpool. Liverpool are crying out, absolutely crying out for some pace in wide areas. Sean mentioned it before as well at the start of the show about he didn't think that Slot wanted to venture too far from having pace in wide areas. But we didn't buy anyone. We didn't buy anyone. In fact, we sold Diaz. And again, retrospectively, that looks iffy when you've not replaced that kind of option within the team. You know, for me as well, I know he's injured now, Isak, but he's crying out for pace in wide areas who can provide cutbacks to him. That's Semenyo's game. Semenyo's a great goal-scoring wide player. Or he's certainly on a good run of form goal-scoring wise. But if you look at it, his play generally, he does get into wide areas and pull it back. You know, he's a good crosser of the ball. I think, you know, positionally as well, he can play off both flanks. One of the things that's drove me mad this season is the over-reliance on Gakpo. Gakpo's now injured, and Gakpo does not get wide. He cuts in, he's got that one obvious move, which can be very effective, but when it's not, he's out the game. He's out the game. So to have someone who can get on the outside on the left, offer a goal-scoring threat, offer pace and offer pullbacks, but also you've got an eye on the Salah question going forward. Well, Semenyo's arguably better on the right as well. So you could almost have it envisaged where there was a short-term gig of him playing on the left this season, but a long-term view of him switching over to the right. So I think it just makes all kind of sense. Am I saying that he's the next iteration of Mane? No, I'm not. But I don't know what his ceiling is. And I know he's big, powerful, technically good, rapid, hard to knock off the ball, great in the air. We've lacked that outlet from the big Van Dijk switches. We've lacked that as much this season. So again, makes all kind of sense. I'll be amazed for the value that he's available at for a player of that quality, Premier League proven, Premier League ready. There's no sense of a risk here of him losing his value. So it just seems to me to make sense. And if Liverpool don't make that move, then surely to God, they've got something else in the pipeline, because they can't really surely be planning for the rest of the season with the limited options that they've got.
Yeah, I'll be amazed if he doesn't move in January. The manager asked about options and injuries. Here he is talking about Alexander Isak.
No, it's going to be a long injury. for a couple of months. So yeah, that's a big disappointment for him, and as a result of that, of course, also for us.
How does it impact things in January? I'm thinking it kind of emphasises the need for Mo to be a part of things and obviously not leave the club, but also will you be looking to add to your forward line? You're being linked with Antoine Semenyo, would that be an option? And still talk of bringing Harvey Elliott back as well.
I think my first and only thoughts are on the upcoming 2 games. 2 difficult ones again, 2 home games, that's really nice. So I think it's a time for the players we do have available to do what they've done so many times, to roll their sleeves up. And not only our players but our fans as well, to help us in the best possible way to get the results we want in the upcoming 2 games, because therefore the players that are available need to give everything they have as the fans, as they usually do, and I expect them to do now again as well, will help us, and that is where my focus is on.
Carpus?
Just in terms of the rest of the injuries then, Conor Bradley went off,
Yeah.
Joe, Cody and Noah, any updates on those?
Con will be 50-50, Connor. He's not training with us today, not tomorrow, so Friday we will see where he exactly is, if he can be in the squad, yes or no, for the weekend. Joe won't be available, Wata won't be available. Who do I miss? Cody? A bit similar to Connor.
And Sean, obviously it is Wolves this weekend. I say this weekend, we're recording this 3 or 4 days before the game, so it feels like still an age away. It is a game you'd expect Liverpool to do the business in. You know, we spoke before the Spurs game, you know, Wolves have only got 2 points now. One of those came against Spurs. They get close to a point at Arsenal. It's obviously a late own goal that kind of gets Arsenal over the line. With all that though, it is a football match where you'd expect Liverpool, even with the knocks and the injuries, to go and take 3 points.
You do. It's always difficult when you see lots of a side struggling, when you see them play against, let's say, Brentford, where they are going to be a little bit higher up the pitch, especially if they're at home and they're going to try and commit a few more bodies forward, because it's a game that they've got to take something from, minimum of a point. Right now, they need to be putting 3 points on the table at home. And more than anything, just to lift the mood of the club at home. Whereas, really, you have to look at the Arsenal display. And I think if you mitigate Arsenal, if you remember that weekend, pretty much everyone who played in the Champions League struggled that weekend. I know City got a great result at Palace, but it had come on the end of a really difficult schedule, and Palace had the chances. The game was in the balance until City go 2-0. So Arsenal, set-piece reliance against a low block, end of a busy schedule, you're probably not going to see them at their free-flowing, attacking best. But it means we are going to face like 2 banks of 5, low block, edge of the penalty area, and we've got to go and break it down. And as we've been saying, you've got no Mo Salah, no Isak. It more than ever, thank God, you know, Florian Wirtz appears to be okay, and then it's cramping, nothing more serious. Because ultimately, this is one of the big reasons he was sad, is that if you look at Liverpool last season, it was a very strong midfield, a very talented midfield, a lot of all-round central midfielders. But Florian Wirtz is that bit of stardust, isn't he? That against the low block defences, that's where you're looking for the combinations and that special bit of movement. So, you know, there's question marks over Strand Larsen in terms of links away and whether he plays. And I think the big thing from Arsenal is it's difficult for Rob Edwards. Can he get them to deliver? It's such a sucker blow for them. Can they do it again? They feel such a sorry club right now, don't they? Can they come and do that again? Because if they do, this is going to be a really difficult game for Liverpool. I think it's really interesting. The first thing the manager came out with was we need the crowd. I think it's really interesting. I think that tells you where the manager's head's at. I think the manager's looking at this going, I'm down to the bare bones here, and this is going to be difficult. The last thing I need is a quiet Anfield that's wondering after 20 minutes why we're not 1 or 2-0 up, because I do think this is going to be much tougher than maybe some others might think.
I think the Arsenal game, Wolves v Arsenal, it is a reminder that even when you face a team that's that's down there, you know, we've only got a couple of points, as I mentioned before, it can still be a problematic game of football. And as I say, Arsenal get over the line with their own goal, 94th minute. Spurs was similar. All that said, though, it's been a really tough time for this Wolves team. You talk about Rob Edwards leaving Middlesbrough. I know he played for Wolves, but it strikes me as a mad decision to leave a team top of the Championship. He's dogging it out with Wolves. I think they're on a streak now, which in all comps is 11 straight defeats. They have a glorious September where they get 2 draws and they beat Everton. So I want to have a word said against them. But that was when they were doing all right, but 11 straight defeats. So I can accept that these teams can come to Anfield and make it difficult and play, really defensively and dog it out. But it's 11 straight defeats. Even with the injuries, Liverpool have to be taking care of business this weekend.
They do, but I think Sean's also right. You can think that, but you can also think there's it's very, very possible Liverpool get in here and it's half-time, 0-0, and there's disquiet off the back of that from supporters' perspectives, because there's supporters will see is that these have only got 2 points, and there's a reason for that. I've got some stuff later on after we speak to Rich. These aren't as bad as Southampton last season. The underlying numbers say they're nowhere near as bad as Southampton's worst last season. I'm not going to say they're having hard lines, but they're on the verge or quite consistently sort of in games with 20 to go a lot of the time. And so I think it's important to remember that, there's players here who have played and function in Premier League teams that have stayed up. One of the problems they've got is they've actually lost a couple, but a lot of the players who were there last season and were part of them staying up are still there. So they're not like a newly promoted side who've come up and have immediately gone, oh my God, we're so far out of our depth. We've seen those teams in the past. Southampton were arguably won last season, but we've seen those sides in the past. Edwards' Luton, to an extent, were that side for a period of time, and they in the end managed to finish 18th. That was worse than them. I'm a little bit of the view that they're going to want to make it as hard as humanly possible. For Liverpool, there's just a point at which you break them. If you go 1, you go 2, you're going to be dealing with pretty abject, sad footballers, as Sean said. It's Liverpool's job to bring the sadness here and just sort of remind Wolves this is the middle of the season that you're in. The issue that the manager has, and I thought the manager was, about as subdued as I've seen him in a press conference since he's been at the club today. I suspect at the minute, for a couple of reasons, and it's odd to say now that he's back unbeaten in 6, but I reckon he's had a pretty rocky couple of days in work where he's going in and getting terrible news, frankly, about the footballers that he would like to pick. And he's, as I say, I think it's the most sort of subdued I've felt he is. Not least because he's now preparing for a game where he sort of doesn't get to win. Like, if we win, we're all just going to go, well, of course we should have won. Your win is just... And listen, there's points in every season where you've got to do a professional job. We could be flying high, and this would still feel like a little bit like, it's funny to say, but one that you just need to get out the way. You need to walk out with... That's what Arsenal needed, and Arsenal do it in the end. But it felt like they took a couple of body blows in process like that. It wouldn't surprise me if it's in the back of some Arsenal minds, this one, that they suffer with Wolves in a couple of weeks to come. So now listen, just get the win. Any win will do. You get out, you go from there. The other thing to point out as well is if people are thinking about goal difference or anything like that, don't. If Liverpool do get a couple ahead, even if Wolves do seem pretty sad, the manager's under an obligation to protect players. At this point, this isn't a let's ramp the scoreboard up, lads, let's all go and enjoy ourselves. It's the essence of a sheer professional job. The lads who are remaining on the pitch, if Liverpool do get a couple ahead, their job is just to keep Wolves at arm's length and just try to see the game out. And I've been quite critical of that at times when Liverpool have been doing that last couple of seasons. I think there's been a bit too much of that. But right now, when he's got what he's got to pick from, it's what it's going to have to be. So I think in a number of ways, what he needs is he almost needs to be last on match of the day. It finished Liverpool 2, Wolves 0. It was 2-0 at half-time. There's barely a shot in the second half. And you got half an hour of Federico Chiesa coming off the bench and running around. That is almost what he wants in this one. And Ekitike's wrapped up in cotton wool before we go to Leeds, or before we have the home game against Leeds. That's his job. That's not a fun job as a football manager, but that's his job, and it's the player's job as well.
Did he strike you, Stu, as a seriously sad football team? Wolves, as I say, that win against Everton in the League Cup was all the way back in September. Nothing since then. It wouldn't take much, would it, to make them look even unbelievably sad if Liverpool do get a couple of goals up. You can imagine just, those players just regressing even further and not really engaging too much, because there comes a point, doesn't in seasons where, and they'll already be feeling this, they know they're going down. There's a personal pride thing, I'm sure, but they know they're going down. So you can see a scenario where if Liverpool do get an early advantage, then that maybe just takes the game away from Wolves. And from a Liverpool point of view, you can't ask for much more over Christmas. Nice gaps between the games. You got Wolves at home, Leeds at home, Fulham to come. I'd be looking at that and thinking, surely it's got to be 9 points, boys. Listen, maybe a deal on 7 because Fulham away can be a little bit tricky, but I'd be sitting there thinking, no, before you go to Arsenal on the 8th of Jan, it's got to be 9 points.
Yeah, I agree with that. I felt, I said on a show yesterday, that I felt that the Tottenham game felt like a hinge game, really, because you couldn't ask for more in terms of the following fixtures leading up to Arsenal. And there was, I wouldn't want to say loads of momentum, but signs of momentum going into that game, and a sense of some kind of plan to get us out of the mire that we'd been in. But ultimately, I do agree with Neil that I think Wolves are better than they look. I feel that I think ultimately they're just poor in both boxes. But they do find a way to stay in games. Liverpool get 1, they've got to get 2. That's where I am at with it. As soon as they get 1, get 2, because I do think that'll kill it. But if there's only 1 goal in it and you're going into the last 15, we're all going to be having kittens again. I can guarantee that. You know, look at the Arsenal game. I think it was an own goal, but they got a goal in the 90th minute and nearly took those couple of points from Arsenal. We've got to make sure that that's not. The 3 points aren't any of their business. 1 point isn't any of their business as we're going into the last 10 minutes. I think it will be tough. I think that it will be quite a dry game to watch. I think it'll be a bit dogged. But what I want to see from Liverpool is that they've realised that that was a hinge game and that they are all business now. They are all business going into this game. They're not thinking about the one after that. They're just focusing on this game. And then once they've won that game, then all they're thinking about is Leeds. All they're thinking about is that. All business now. Just get over the line, get the 3 points, so that you can put yourself in a position where you feel a bit better about yourselves, that you're in some kind of top 3, top 4 talk going into that Arsenal game.
There's a comparison. They played before the last international break. They were at home to Chelsea. They went away to Chelsea, and it's 0-0 at half time. Chelsea's XG is under 1. It finishes Chelsea's XG is 3.5, and Chelsea win 3-0. And they go 1. They go 1 on 50, 2 on 60, 3 on 70. They go bang, 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 see you later. And as I say, they run off into the distance. But it's 0-0. And Wolves don't have a shot first half. Don't get me wrong, they do not manage a single shot. But Chelsea don't create. They create 1 decent opportunity. Apart from that, they don't do anything else. And I'm sure there'll have been some people in Stamford Bridge going, good God, come on, lads. But you've got to allow, as Stu says, they've got decent midfielders. We saw it when we went there last season. When we went to Molineux last season, I thought they played quite well for 25 minutes first half. But there's loads of running, and then they don't get any reward for that 25 minutes. There's not that many shots. There's loads of ball flashing across the box, but there's not actually that many attempts. And then Liverpool just cruise through it and get out the other side and pick the points up. And I think there's going to be an element here where professional pride does play a part. These lads are going to run hard, I think. But that almost can work for you. As long as Liverpool can ensure that nothing daft happens whilst they're running hard. And maybe if Liverpool do nick 1, then all the better. I think that there's Liverpool have still got to pace themselves and they've got to be sensible. But there's no reason where if it is tight at half-time to think, oh, we're in real bother here. I think you've got to allow them to sort of to have their good go, to run themselves out. Against Brentford there, the 2-0, it was 0-0 at half-time there. I think I'm right in saying against Brentford. So, you've got to allow this from them to an extent and go from there.
They strike me as a team, Sean, just with a real lack of stardust now. You go up against Wolves in kind of recent years, there'd always be like maybe 2 or 3 players over, the last kind of 5 years or so where you think, well, I wouldn't mind it. He's a good player. We can pay it. Yeah, if you give him an opportunity, my God, he can do some damage. And we know who those players are. And we've played against a number of them over a number of years now. People like Neto, for instance, who's obviously got his big move to Chelsea. Strand Larsen's still there, almost got his big move to Newcastle. Doesn't quite happen. He's probably their main man. But again, you look at him and you think, just looks really sad. He has that opportunity, doesn't he, against Brentford from the spot, misses it, kind of decent save to be fair. But he's probably the focal point. And even he just looks a mile off what he was last season.
Yeah, totally. I mean, obviously, gutted about the move, and then to what extent is it his responsibility in terms of his form and performance? And then I'm sure his camp will be saying, well, look what I'm playing in. service, rhythm. You know, I can not touch the ball or get chances, and then all of a sudden I've got to blow hot. And tough luck if you play for a team down there. That's what you've got to do as a number 9 striker. I think one thing with this timing of this game compared to Arsenal that might be interesting, how many lads in that dressing room want out? How many lads in that dressing room are starting to worry about a World Cup place or a World Cup playoff place going, I can't be around this for the next 5-6 months. My reputation's going down the Swanee.
And have you seen people like Cunha leave, for instance, who's gone to United and things like that, you know, another good player out the door, then it's almost like, fucking hell, boys, who's going to bail us out of the next one?
You saw what City did in January, and a lot of their transfers last year didn't quite work, but might Wolves behind the scenes be thinking, we need one eye on next year? Like, we can make 2 windows ahead of getting promotion, or do we rely on one? And who knows with their team selection and their mindset? I'm sort of hoping that they're not coming into this with quite the same mindset as they come into against Arsenal, if that's going to help Liverpool at all. But yeah, in terms of Strand Larsen, he's still a threat. I mean, the good thing for Liverpool is they're literally going to sit down and watch so many clips of Arsenal, Wolves. I imagine they'll be bored of it. But if there was going to be any complacency, there won't be once they go through that.
It is Wolves this weekend, so it's Rich Hobbs.
I'm joined by Rich Hobbs to talk about Wolverhampton Wanderers. I'm mixed on all this, Rich. I'm not, first and foremost, let's be clear, Wolves have had a bit of hard lines over the course of the season with the results. There's no way this side is so bad it should only have 2 points at this stage. But you and I have been talking for the last 3 or 4 years on a variety of shows, and one of the things you've been saying is this is just degrading, and it's just degrading and just degrading and just degrading, and it's all about the ownership of Wolverhampton Wanderers. And where I've got a lot of pity and sympathy for the supporters, for whoever the manager is, for those players, it's not the people who've been the ultimate decision makers who have to rock up and play football. It is the footballers, and I'm sure the footballers feel terrible about the fact that they've only got 2 points.
Yeah, I mean, how I've kind of looked at, particularly like this season, it's like you can't blame an owner, a chief exec, a manager for your centre half losing the ball on the edge of his own box. That's like that. I think essentially in-game moments, it's the player's fault. Over the course of 90 minutes, that's a manager who needs to take accountability for it, because actually they're the ones who are governing, directing the game. Over the course of the season, that's on a hierarchical, where you call it senior leadership, whatever. And it ultimately, the players haven't been good enough, the coaching hasn't been good enough, and the overall managing of the club as a whole hasn't been good enough over a period of time, and it's kind of gone from being this steady decline to a quite a big, an incredible drop off, like a borderline unprecedented drop off if we're being brutally honest.
It's one of the things that's striking is I had a little look at the highlights of the game against Brentford. And one of the things that hit me was, it wasn't like Wolves allowed a ton of shots over the course of the match. It wasn't that sort of day at the office. But all the shots they did allow, they were decent opportunities. You know, it was 8 pretty decent opportunities that not absolute tap-ins, but 8 pretty decent opportunities inside the penalty area that Brentford managed to carve out. And, you know, at any level of football, you can't be letting the opposition have 8 kicks at your goal between the sticks from 12 yards out. Eventually, one of them goes in.
Yeah, and especially at brutally at Premier League level, it doesn't matter what team apart from Wolves. If you're going to give that number of good chances to, then you're going to get punished. And it's almost felt like we've probably given about the same amount of chances to most teams. And it's almost like poor teams, or bottom half teams, or however you want to describe it, get 2 goals against us. Top half teams get 4 goals against us. And it's almost like no in between. And then you get the fluctuations. Let's say like Arsenal, we played Arsenal, and you could argue we were unlucky in the grand sense. I mean, we went there to get a draw and limit as much as humanly possible. But you're right. I think it kind of goes back to the who's accountable thing, because if it was just we were completely dropping off or giving, it's worrying how kind of obvious these big chances are kind of being carved open for a team who historically play 5 at the back, so there shouldn't be big gaps. We play, sometimes 5 at the back and 3 in midfield, and we somehow still always look like we're a man short.
I'm expecting it to be similar to the selection and approach against Arsenal. You mentioned that game. I mean, that is one which does feel unlucky. Let's be clear, Arsenal still had a number of shots, not great ones though. It's worth saying, it was a pretty solid approach from Wolves over the course of the match. But they were able to keep Arsenal at arm's length. Do you feel as though that'll be the plan coming into this one against Liverpool?
Oh, I think it has to be. I think, however inconsistent Liverpool have kind of ultimately been this over the course of this season, it feels like at the moment Wolves are that team that if you're on a bit of a ropey run and you see Wolves are coming up, it's like, don't worry, that's going to be our course corrector. And for Liverpool, with, appreciate this is a Wolves segment on Liverpool show, with everything that's been going on and off the pitch at Liverpool in the last 6 weeks, actually, you know what, post-Christmas, being able to absolutely thrash a team like Wolves is just it's a nice one for Liverpool to kind of go, you know what, this is what we need. So from a Wolves perspective, we just need to limit as much as possible, but we don't seem to even have that necessarily nasty side to being able to limit and frustrate. It just feels very by the numbers of just trying to get through a 90 minutes without conceding, rather than almost try and get under the opposition's skin.
Do you feel the manager's come in part of why he's come in to try to make this a bit more dignified, which so far he's not quite been able to do, although the scorelines have tightened up. But do you think he's ultimately come in with an eye on next season?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, my kind of rationale for Rob Edwards leaving his kind of top 4 job in the Championship for bottom of the table Wolves is that we're almost certainly going to get relegated this season when he took over. And he knows that at Middlesbrough, if he didn't get them promoted this season, there is a chance he'd have lost his job at the end of this season.
Yeah.
Whereas if he can get a honourable relegation at Wolves, that actually if he kind of doesn't make it a complete and utter embarrassment, then he's got a job for next season. And he is tried and tested in the Championship. So I kind of understand why he looked to Wolves and could see it as actually, you know what, I've got as good a chance being with Wolves in 12 months' time as I do with Middlesbrough ultimately. I don't know whether he's realised he's bitten off more than he can chew in terms of what the current state of morale within that team is, or the football club as a whole, because he's not necessarily known for someone who is a master tactician, Rob Edwards. Everything you hear and say about him he is very kind of people orientated. He's a coach who improves people by, uplifting and really kind of eking out the intangibles out of players. Sadly, a lot of these Wolves players don't have the intangibles about them. And it's showcased. I've probably mentioned a few times that we've gone through, I think it's 6 captains in 5 years now.
Yeah,
there is not a really strong core senior leadership within this team. You've got arguably fourth best centre half as your captain. They don't necessarily give it to João Gomez because ultimately he's on the conveyor line to leave the club.
Yeah.
And, and he is the best of the bad bunch. And so it's about a player who I think is a really, really good talent and can play in a lot of Premier League teams ultimately. But, we've kind of made this kind of rod for our own back now that there's not enough kind of driving the players forward in terms of their accountability. When you've got a mid-30-year-old Matt Doherty kind of coming out, post-match, saying similar things, I completely get it, but there's not. It doesn't seem to like be a core of those players, and like I've seen Wolves be rubbish in times, and particularly in that first season under the Fosun group, and we had Paul Lambert, and we looked a little bit we looked quite ropey at points that season, but there was a clear nucleus in that team who weren't trying to let standards drop because they knew there was just enough quality amongst some of the newer players to really drag it forward. Sadly, now we don't have that. The really strong characters, at least visibly, to really kind of be making sure those players were accountable. Nor do we necessarily have the quality of those players like a Cunha, for example, who could go missing for a couple of games, but could also win you a game. And sadly, kind of that mix between not enough of the tangibles and the intangibles it's really apparent now.
Okay, thank you very much from Rich. One more point I wanted to bring up, Rich, obviously, is this is the first time Wolves have visited Anfield, or for that matter, Liverpool have visited Molineux since the tragic passing of Diogo Jota and his brother Andre Silva. It will be an emotional occasion for a number of Wolves supporters. It was clear in the aftermath of the tragedy, the extent to which Diogo was obviously viewed very affectionately across the football world as a whole, but especially at Molineux as well for what he did there.
Yeah, I think as I say, grief's a funny old thing, and I think particularly kind of when it kind of particularly comes to football, and obviously he was a Liverpool player, but it felt like he was still a Wolves player in certain regards. That we've seen you see players come and go from football clubs, and he was someone who came into the project with it being arguably a stepping stone for him. But he did what you need to do for it to be a stepping stone. He worked hard. He consistently, performed, and was someone who very clearly gave his all. And these are probably things that Liverpool fans would say the same. It kind of speaks to again. Leading back to what I was saying, that character of the man. That when he went to Liverpool, he earned that move, and all the virtues that you ultimately want in a footballer, and someone who would kind of live and die for your shirt. He gave, which, considering the mercenary level of football players, particularly in what we were kind of doing at the time in the Championship, still really stood out. But the likes of him and Ruben Neves, you could see how much it meant for them to be playing in England, so to speak. And it's tricky to say, because I think people kind of it's not about him being, oh well, he was Liverpool's player or he was a Wolves player. Ultimately, he was a man, he was a human, and he was held in affections of a lot of people. And I think it'll be interesting. I think it'll be quite a somber occasion. I think on Saturday. So yeah, it will be Saturday. You lose times of days of the week at this point. I'm not trying to do the maths. So yeah, and it's. I think Wolves. Wolves did our tribute at the first home game of the season, which was wonderful to see. I think, in a way, probably both clubs to a degree have kind of felt the emotional impact of that, and I think it'll be interesting to sort of see how it plays out. Whether it's kind of, I guess, from the official marking of it from football clubs or via fans as well, and how that kind of ultimately trickles down onto on the atmosphere, impacts the players on the pitch.
Okay, thank you very much to Rich on that, and let's get back over and speak to Ian.
And thanks to Rich and Neil. Obviously, Rich has laid it out there in terms of what Wolves might do this weekend. You've got some stats in terms of the numbers and what they've been putting up. Talk to us.
Yeah, what I think is so hard for them, Ian, is you look at that Brentford game and it's pretty tight at half time. The race map's there, 45 minutes, really low chance game for both teams. But where it ends up is you look at the shot map that they concede against Brentford, and none of them are great opportunities, but they're all about 0.2 expected goals. So they concede 8 shots. You can see them there. There's effectively 6 of the 7 that they have that are slap bang in the middle of the penalty area between the sticks from somewhere between 6 and 18 yards out. You can't, and the other one's close to the 6-yard box on the angle. You can't allow 7 attempts at this level that are good attempts. So the XG for Brentford's not mad. It's not a mad number. 1.28 doesn't feel mad, but that's only off 7 efforts. And they're all decent chances. They're all chances that you'd expect at some point Premier League players to stick a couple in the back of the net. And that's exactly what happens with Lewis Potter. He gets both goals. And listen, it's different. The way, as Sean said before, the way he wants to play at home against Brentford is a little bit different. But this is what they're doing. You know, they're not as bad in the underlying numbers sense and in a couple of different senses as sides that you've seen before, but they're still pretty bad. What they do against Arsenal, which is the most impressive thing, it isn't that Arsenal don't get chances. They do. They're just all not very good ones. The set pieces and the bits and pieces from distance, and they're a bit panicked. It ends up being 2 own goals for Arsenal, so they don't really move the needle very much. But what you get to see is what they do against Arsenal, which you've got to think they'll do against Liverpool, is 5-3-2, where, I mean, you know, I've got the graphic there of the lineup. StatsBomb tries to have it as being sort of 1 deep line midfielder and 2 centre mids. I think if we're honest about it, it's 3 deep line midfielders. That's it in there. It's just not very nice to write that down. The wing backs, you know, there's a couple that they might use. Doherty's one. Muller Wolf was quite highly thought of before he signed, and this is back to Sean's point about protecting reputations. I think he was signed as this lad might be quite good, you know, and it's just been a nightmare for him. The thing to point out is all 3 centre-backs have spent a season having a rick in them. The goalkeeper has spent a season of having a rick in him. And if that is the place that you are as a football team, it's not a good place to be. When we've just said before about the forwards, they'll have Hwang and Strand Larsen up front probably. Strand Larsen might not be involved because West Ham might be on the horizon. But this is back to, they might have picked that front 2 at Liverpool last season and stayed up. There was a point where they've been 5 consecutive league games. These lads will have been around that picture. They're not divvies. Andre Trindade was strongly linked with Liverpool for a while. João Gomez has been linked with Champions League clubs in the middle of the park. He'll play, unless what Sean says is a factor. You know, they're not absolute idiots. But the point is, at the minute, what they're conspiring to become is that, around the underlying numbers, you look at Southampton's last season and you look at Wolves. So Southampton's worst last season, 10-game roll and 10-game average, you know, has them conceding almost all the way up to 2.6 expected goals on an average, and in there at the bottom end of that, they're only creating about 0.7. Wolves even now just isn't that bad. They're about 0.6 in terms of what they're creating, but they're only conceding about 1.6. There's a 1 goal difference, if you see what I mean, rolling game in terms of chances. I'm not saying they're good, far from it. I'm just saying they're not as bad as the worst version of Southampton last season. I'd argue they're not as bad as the worst version of Sheffield United. Remember when they went 4-0, 5-0 down at home to Arsenal in 25 minutes, and it looked like all those players just didn't even want to be on the pitch. I don't think they haven't reached that in the DE yet. No. So I think, you know, that's me one bit of proportion to point out. They've not been that bad yet. But it is also worth saying that, you know, where have Liverpool been A and B, you know, obviously what does the manager have available to him?
Not been that bad, Stu, as some of those other teams, but it is still a record low. Points-wise for this stage of the season. You've got to be clear on that. Listen, we'll hear from the manager in a minute on set pieces, but it wouldn't be a bad weekend for Liverpool to start putting some of that right. You know, the manager talks about how poor we've been. He can't really understand how it's gone so bad from a set-piece point of view. Talks about the setup being exactly the same virtually as last season. Yes, 1 or 2 different players coming in, of course. Now, Wolves don't concede that many from set pieces, and thank fuck they don't score a lot either, in fairness, only 1 this season. But that does feel like in a game like this where it can be tight, that can be a way home for Liverpool.
I thought it was really interesting that he chose this game to talk about it because, you know, you'd think it would be the talk before the Leeds game because Leeds set pieces, their set piece accumulation is great, and they are a real threat from that. Wolves aren't on paper. You know, you look at the raw facts and figures there, they're not much of a threat. And I almost wondered whether, because he spoke about not just us conceding, but also scoring from set pieces. And I do wonder if he's got an eye on Liverpool having to break them down, get the first goal through a set piece of our own.
And they should be able to with Konate, Van Dijk, you know, big, powerful boys. You know, start of the season, you're frustrated with Konate because he's getting so many opportunities and not taking them. But we know the captain, we know the big fella. If there's a good quality delivery and it's in the vicinity of him, there's always a chance of him getting on the end of it.
I don't know what's happened with Konate from the player we bought. because in those first few months when we signed him, he looked unstoppable from set pieces. Every corner that came in, it felt like, oh my God, you've got a 6'5" tank running into the box. I mean, that one against Manchester City at Wembley was unbelievable. I felt like he ran through 6 players, just carried them all on his back. I don't know, he doesn't seem much of a threat these days from a set piece, and I'd love him to be an option there, because if it's always Van Dijk, it's that obvious, isn't it? It's that obvious, and surely it's easier for the opposition to prepare for that. Liverpool, I do think, are going to be in a dogged game here. I think Wolves are going to be hard to break down. I think a set piece for Liverpool could be crucial. And yeah, I think the manager bringing that up isn't necessarily what everyone thinks in terms of defensively. Listen, we've got to be right on that as well. We've got to be switched on, and we will absolutely have to be switched on in the game against Leeds. But it might just be a game breaker for us to be able to nick one from a set piece ourselves.
Here is the manager talking about set pieces.
We're not focusing on that at this moment. We are so focused on that. I am so focused and since I'm here as well, but I know the importance of set pieces. It gets more and more and more and more and more. That's why we are so annoyed by our current record, because it's impossible to play top 4, top 5 with our set piece balance, let alone winning the league. So we're the only team in the top end of the table that has a negative set piece balance. All the others are positive set piece balance, and we're not only negative, we're -8. -8, and we're still on equal points, 4th, I think, if I'm correct. So we all know why, because in open chances created, we're the number 1 in the league. So no one has to tell me how important set pieces are, and not even any manager in the world anymore, let alone in the Premier League, because the Premier League is now, if I say 50-50, I exaggerate a bit too much, but set pieces are so important. That's why it's a big frustration for us that we are where we are this season, because last season, when we were halfway through the season, we had not even conceded one set piece yet. And in the second half of the season, where I've said many times already that we didn't play the same football anymore as we did the first half of the season, not as good anymore, for all kind of reasons, but we had a great set piece record, because I think we scored 7 set pieces the second half of the season. So it's a chance for you winning the league if you have a good set piece balance. But if we are -8 and Chelsea is, I think, +8, Arsenal's +8, I don't exactly know the numbers, but they're all, United is very high in set pieces. So if you look at that, you could almost say how special it is that we are having the points we're having, if you have that set piece balance.
Sean, so in terms of Liverpool then, what do you think the manager's going to do this weekend? He's talked a little bit about 1 or 2 might train in the next day or so, which is good news given where the squad is in terms of availability and options. What do you think that lineup looks like?
Well, Gomez is out, isn't he? And he says that Bradley and Gakpo can't train today or tomorrow and might be able to train. What would be Boxing Day, the day before the game.
Calls it 50-50 for both of them in terms of making the game.
I think with where Liverpool are at right now, it'd be almost negligent to look to start either of them. He also says that Frimpong, he was specifically told he's got 30 minutes in it. Now, managers use that kind of minute terminology. Probably what they're talking about is how many 30-kilometre sprints they can do. And they've worked out that during a 30-minute period, Frimpong will do that many. Now, the reason I mention that is I wonder whether that means you want to play Frimpong right midfield or right wing in this game. Because if you've got him at right back against Wolves, you're going to want him overlapping and getting forward to break down a packed defence. But then he's sprinting all the way back. And if you need to get an hour out of him because you're thinking you might be able to just squeeze half an hour out of Conor Bradley maybe. So I think Bradley and Gakpo make the squad. But I think with where we're at right now, can you imagine if we use them and then they're out? Not just for Leeds, but Fulham, Arsenal. I agree with Neil. I've not seen the manager so subdued in a press conference. I think that's why he wants the crowd and has mentioned it for this game, because I think he sees this as an island. I think he wants to wrap Gakpo and Bradley up in cotton wool and go, I can play you both from the start against Leeds with that little bit of a gap. And I wonder, this won't go down well because of where they want him to play and how well he's been doing where he is. But I wonder whether you start Curtis Jones at right back, because he's not going to spend any time at right back. bottom line is you're going to move them into midfield. They're going to be in a low block, and it means you can put Frimpong high and wide on the right-hand side, Florian Wirtz left, Hugo Ekitike in the middle, and then you've got Grav, McAllister. You can use another, potentially, in terms of what you want to do. Now, you might say, I'll play Chiesa. If you like an almost 4-4-2 it in that way, I don't know. But I just think that if he puts Frimpong in at right back, it gives you a big question. Who's playing right forward there? Now, it might be Chiesa, but he's shown... Has he got 100 minutes in him? Because with the time wasted and everything going on in this game, we're going to be playing 48 and 48, I have no doubt.
I agree with the boys on the manager being subdued, Stu. I think a little bit of it might have been, you know, with losing a player like Isak, where maybe he was just starting to show something. And I also think he was really pissed off with the tackle as well, with the Van der Ven thing. Now, interestingly, I caught a little bit of the preamble to Monday Night Football, and Carragher didn't really see a massive issue with Van der Ven's challenge. You know, he said himself, I've been in that position loads and loads of times. You're just trying to get your body across. But I think when you do it in the style of Van der Ven did it, where the legs are almost acting in that scissor motion, then there's a chance that you are going to injure a footballer. And I think that's why the manager was so annoyed and pissed off, because he's lost a really valuable asset at a really important time to what he sees as reckless behaviour on the football pitch. And he's looking at this game at the weekend and thinking, who the fuck am I playing? Because we know he's got suspensions as well as injuries. It's a really tough one for the manager in terms of how he's going to line them up and set them up at the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, on the Van der Ven thing, I've got a bit of sympathy with both sides, because Van der Ven's got to make the challenge.
He's not trying to do him either. I don't think he's trying to do him. He's just trying to get it in the way, but it's just the motion, the action, isn't it, I suppose?
I agree with that, and as soon as you see it with the legs in that scissor motion, if you like, it does pose that question. But I also look at it and think, how else is he going to go? I think there's not that many options, because if he goes 2 feet together, then he's accused of something else, and it could really endanger an opponent. I think coming from the angle he was at, and the kind of recovery tackle he was trying to make, I just think from a sheer human motion, it was quite difficult, very unfortunate. I don't think there was any malice, intended there. In terms of the lineup, I think, the more you think about it, you tie yourself up in knots, because I think if Bradley's not fit, and by the sounds of it, it's touch and go whether he'll make the bench, and if Frimpong, if he can only do 30 minutes, as Sean's outlined there, I think we've got real issues, because you've got no Gomez either. Your Jones situation, your Jones move, I think is potentially a problem, because who you play, when Sean said play another in midfield, I'm thinking who? Unless you're going to play Wright centrally, maybe, but then who are you playing on the left? So I think it is really, really tricky, this. I think once you just make your right back decision, and if you can get out,
what is your right back?
Well, if you can get half out of, because we don't know. It feels like.
Do you think they'll risk Bradley? Because I think they're at a point now where he, despite being talented, his availability is a fucking problem. It's a problem, and he's a good player. And I think, listen, he's still got some way to go yet to fulfil his potential. But this in and out the team thing, Liverpool have got a problem long term with right back. If he can't sort his fitness out, and Frimpong doesn't look like a conventional right back. We know he's not. He's not really played as a right back before. He's more of a wing back. It is a tricky one for the Reds to sort out.
Liverpool have got a problem at right back, definitely because of Bradley's fitness issues. I think you asked me there about, well, which one are you doing? I don't think you can say it's so far away. The manager himself has said that, it's not until Friday that he might train again. It feels like by which time Isak might be back on the bench. To be honest, it's so far away. So I think it's too far. What I'd like to do, I'd like Bradley to be fit. I'd like him to play, and then I think that alleviates an awful lot of problems. But I think we've got some issues there. I really do. I'd like to see Chiesa start. I think he should. Under the circumstances, I think he's played well whenever he's played this season. I think if you're not going to play him now, I just don't understand what the point is having him in the squad. I don't get it. I think there'll be shouts for Rio. I wouldn't start him if I could avoid it, but I definitely want him off the bench, because I think you look at the way Wolves line up with that back three and that heavy five in midfield. I think a pace and wide area would be useful at some point, but I think you might negate him if you bring him on too early. I think you want him to be an unplanned for threat later on in the game when legs are tired. That could be really useful. But it's just too soon. If you ask me to nail it down, I'll say Bradley, because that's what I want.
Yeah, There's a lot of eating and drinking to be done before we even get near Friday. Neil, I can't see the manager starting Ngamoa. I mean, he talked about, listen, 17-year-old, he's got more minutes than any other 17-year-old, was his words. Whether that's right or not, I've checked it, but that's what he says. Stu's probably right. If Chiesa is not going to start this football match, given everything that's going on and the options available, when would he start one? And I'm not even counting Barnsley in the FA Cup. In terms of a proper, serious football match in the league, if he's not starting this one, when would he start?
I don't know. I think if he's not starting this one, he's not starting any of them. And if he's not starting any of them, there's massive questions about why Liverpool kept him in the squad moving through August into September. Was there really nothing that could have been done? Was there not a loan move? Was there not something that could have been done a little bit differently to free the spot up? At the very least, you know, from Liverpool's point of view, but I've got no confidence he'll start Chiesa. I think he'll work hard not to. What that actually means in practice, I think, is somewhat up in the air. It wouldn't surprise me to see him end up with both left-backs starting, because he might just basically take the view of, I've got two senior professionals here. We can lock down an entire flank. They can offer me real width. It can create some space for Wirtz to operate, and there's enough of a gap between Wolves and Leeds to do something. I think Sean's argument around Frimpong is a perfectly sound one. And it may well be that Liverpool go, listen, these are going to play a back five. What we're going to do is we're just going to make the pitch absolutely enormous for them from side to side, and that should give more room for Wirtz to operate. But in that world, I very much want Curtis Jones, because I want Curtis also looking to find the same spaces that Florian Wirtz is looking to find, and also looking to dovetail with him, because I think that that's a massive thing that's brought Wirtz to the party. So whether or not that is Curtis doing it all the way from right back or something else, I don't know. I think it's a funny one, because I think you can say with a lot of confidence what 9 of his 11 starters is going to be. You know, I think you really can. I think you can say, obviously, the goalkeeper, the two centre-backs, the left-back, Gravenberch, McAllister, Jones, Wirtz, Ekitike, they will all start.
Do you think he'd consider Calvin Ramsey, Neil? I mean, he's not played at all apart from that Crystal Palace game, but they're in such a dire situation potentially at right back. I mean, I've no idea what that lad's fitness issues are like in terms of how much
the issue with Palace, though, but the Palace game was, the issue was he's
dead on 45, and he's absolutely blown out of his arse on 45.
That's the problem that you ended up with.
But could he do 45 for him potentially? Maybe.
Yeah, and he might choose that's an option. He might go from there.
He's been on benches, hasn't he, recently?
Yeah.
He's been a couple of benches.
There's also an argument to say, you know, do you go, listen, lads, what I need from you here is 45 minutes, and pick all of his ones he likes the most, and say, massive 45, and if you don't mind, we get in at half time, and we've actually put it to bed. And now, look, here is Calvin Ramsey to go from there and play there. It's a hell of a risk, though, because what if you...
It would seem like a big shock still, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but also what if you miss a couple of chances? And now you ask those lads to absolutely all pour it all out there, and then suddenly there's nothing left for a couple of them and go from there. I think it's one where he's going to have to really, I think, actively manage. I think whatever he does, he's got to do with full commitment. But I think he's got to ensure he's got a sub. Got 2 subs, I think, in the back of his mind. I think it's really tricky. Another thing that we've not said, we've not ventured to, and again, he's meant to be a first-team squad player and he is another year older, is it might just be, everyone's going to focus on Willie Olwoni with Ngamoa. Does he consider with Naoni? Does he wonder about whether or not Naoni can do him 60 minutes in this? Which, you know, as I say, we haven't seen, but Naoni is again, in the same way that Ngamoa is, Chiesa is, Endo is, he is a first-team squad member. And you can do the same argument. If Naoni's not starting this one, what one is he starting? And the answer becomes Barnsley. But what it actually means is, in reality, well, he's not a first-team squad member then. He's not a first-team squad member. And, you know, I think that's difficult. The one thing I would say is that if I was Rio Ngamoa, I would be training for the next 4 days of training as though my life depends on it. I think that's your one here, where if you're Rio, I think you should be the same if you're Chiesa, by the way, but if you're Rio, you should be absolutely looking like I'm eager, I'm keen as onions here, boss. You just throw me in, give me a chance on this one. And it might be that that's a smart way to play it. You know, it might be that Liverpool look at it and say, well, we'll pin Doherty back. We have Ngamoa playing in that space. What he does do, Ngamoa, is he does occupy. He does make he needs to be defended. He needs to be actively defended, and if you're defending him and you're defending Kerkez, there should theoretically be a bit more space for Florian Wirtz to be able to pick up the ball and do a little bit. But I don't know; it's not easy, is it?
No, I'd be surprised, Sean, if Ngamoa started. I mean, the manager, when he was talking about minutes for 17-year-olds, I think he was talking in the context that Ngamoa only turned 17. I think it was August, September time, so he's not long been 17. Just to kind of finish off on some kind of really positives, he was asked about Ekitike and Wirtz, just adjusting in terms of, you know, body shape, maybe putting a bit more muscle on. There's still signs there, though, that they're not quite ready to finish 90. Both were really struggling towards the end of the last game. But you'd have to say, real positives with Wright at the minute in terms of he just looks like he's starting to turn into what we all imagined we were signing, really. And I think it was always destined to happen, given the quality. And in Ekatike, I mean, apart from Haaland, he is the absolute standout centre-forward in the league right now.
Yeah, he's electric, isn't he? I mean, that's actually part of the reason why I would probably depart from what he's been doing previously and look to use Chiesa from the start, because otherwise you've got 3 centre-backs for Wolves, all in a low block. And it might take 3 to stop Hugo at the moment. It might take more, might take 5. But I think if Chiesa can even... People will judge Chiesa's performance on what Chiesa does. But I think if Chiesa, with his movement, can occupy some of the Wolves' centre-halves, I think he can build us around them, Florian and Hugo. And in this game, that has to be the way home, doesn't it? It's basically get them the ball as often as you possibly can. But the problem is they still need room to be able to play. And I think that's where Slot's plan and the training this week has to be, similar to what Neil's saying, no matter who you use, how do you stretch this pitch and make sure that Florian and Hugo can be the best versions of themselves?
Give you a score prediction.
2-0.
You weren't sure there where you were.
No, I was going to say 1, but I think this is going to be really hard.
How do you see it going, Stu?
Little Christmas present to myself, 2-0.
Absolutely. I can get behind that, Neil.
It's 3-2-0s. I think if Liverpool do get to 2-0, Liverpool will deal on 2-0, and I think Wolves will probably deal on 2-0, and that'll be the way in which it goes.
That has been the pre-match warm-up. Thank you, the boys. We'll see you very soon.